Knowledge had always been the very essence of who I was. It was not just a tool or a discipline, but the foundation upon which I built my entire existence. My career, my reputation, my sense of identity and purpose all revolved around the pursuit of understanding, the accumulation of information, the relentless dissection of ideas. I had devoted countless years to the lecture halls, living in libraries lined with books, surrounded by theories and debates that filled my waking hours. As a professor of philosophy and theology, I considered myself a custodian of reason, a defender of rational thought, a master of critical analysis and intellectual rigor. Faith and religion, to me, were the remnants of a more primitive era, emotional scaffolding built to support fragile minds that could not withstand the sharp edges of reality. I never despised those who believed. Hatred was not necessary. I saw them simply as misguided souls, clinging to myths for comfort rather than embracing truth. I viewed it as my duty, even my mission, to expose superstition for what it was and to push others toward reason, toward clarity, toward the light of knowledge. Every lecture became a battlefield where I dismantled the philosophical justifications for God, reducing arguments to contradictions, stripping away centuries of theological weight with the precision of logic. Students admired my sharp wit, my ability to counter claims with historical evidence and scientific grounding. My reputation grew. I was respected, envied, feared. I had built my identity on the demolition of faith, with the cold steel of logic as my weapon. And then everything changed. It began like any other day, without warning, without premonition. The lecture hall was dim, cavernous, filled with the rustle of notebooks and the faint hum of anticipation. Dozens of faces looked up at me, some curious, some already weary, a few visibly resistant. The faithful who still clung to their beliefs despite my constant challenges. I adjusted my tie, stepped to the podium, and began my lecture on the evolution of religious belief. My voice carried the same confidence it always did. Throughout history, I declared, calm and in control, human beings have created gods to explain the unknown, to soften the weight of suffering, to establish rules of morality, and to soothe despair. But these stories were never more than placeholders, bridges from ignorance until knowledge could arrive. I picked up a marker and moved toward the whiteboard. Today, science has filled the gaps religion once claimed. What was once divine mystery is now physics, biology, psychology. Turning back, I let my gaze sweep across the hall. Faith is nothing more than surrender to the unknown. Knowledge, however, knowledge is power. A hand rose. It was the student who had often resisted me, a young woman with clear eyes and a quiet strength. "Professor," she said carefully, "isn't it possible that faith and reason can coexist? That maybe we don't know as much as we think we do?" I smirked, an expression that came easily. I had heard this argument countless times. "Then tell me," I asked, stepping forward, "can you prove that God exists? Empirically? Scientifically? With evidence that can be measured and observed?" Her lips parted, searching for an answer, but hesitation betrayed her. "Exactly," I concluded, nodding sharply. "Belief is faith, not fact, and facts are what matter." I turned back toward the whiteboard, lifted the marker, ready to continue. And then it struck. A searing pain erupted behind my eyes, sudden and violent, as though my skull were being split apart from within. The marker slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor. The room lurched and tilted. My vision fractured into blurs and streaks of light. Students' faces twisted and stretched, their voices muffled and distant as if coming from the far end of a dark tunnel. My knees buckled. I clung to the podium, gasping for air that no longer seemed to reach my lungs. The pressure intensified until I thought my head might shatter. Then something inside me snapped. My body gave way. Darkness swallowed everything. I awoke in silence. Not the silence of an empty room or the stillness of midnight, but a silence that was absolute, eternal, a silence that seemed to precede sound itself. I did not hear voices, footsteps, or even the steady rhythm of a heartbeat. I realized with startling clarity that I was no longer breathing, yet I remained. I was still aware. I blinked, though the sensation was strange. My body felt insubstantial, lighter, unmoored. The crushing pain was gone, replaced by a clarity I had never known. For a fleeting moment, I wondered, was I alive? Had I survived? And then I saw myself. My body lay sprawled across the classroom floor, arms limp, head tilted unnaturally, eyes half open and vacant. Students surrounded me in panic, some sobbing, others shouting, their hands fumbling for their phones. One knelt beside my body, desperately pressing his palms into my chest in frantic compressions. Terror surged through me. I was not inside my body. I was hovering above it, watching. I staggered back, or what felt like staggering, though my movements were weightless, untethered. My hands reached for the nearest desk, but they passed through as though it were mist. I turned to one of my students, a young man I remembered well, now trembling as he shouted into his phone for an ambulance. I tried to grip his shoulder. My hand slipped through him like smoke. "No," I whispered, panic flooding me. "No, I'm right here." But no one heard. I shouted louder, begged, pleaded, nothing. Their eyes passed through me. Their movements continued, frantic, oblivious to my presence. It was as though I no longer existed. The horror deepened. I, who had dismissed all notions of spirits, souls, and afterlives, now found myself disembodied, conscious, undeniable proof of the very mysteries I had rejected. My career had been spent tearing apart such claims, and yet here I was, a contradiction made fleshless. The classroom grew darker, or perhaps it was me unraveling. Panic gripped me, though I had no lungs to fill, no heart to race. I turned toward my body again, desperate. I willed myself to re-enter it, to fuse with it, to wake up. Nothing. I hurled myself downward again and again. Nothing. Then it came. A pull. At first it was faint, like the tug of a thread, subtle but persistent. Within seconds it grew, yanking me backward with an irresistible force, dragging me away from the scene. I twisted, fought, screamed. The harder I resisted, the stronger it became. The classroom warped and blurred, faces dissolving, voices lost to distance. My body vanished from sight. The force consumed me. I was being carried into something vast and unknowable, drawn into a place I could not define. Upward or downward, I could not tell. Only that I was leaving, and there was no going back. The world around me crumbled into a suffocating darkness, a darkness not born of the absence of light, but of something deeper, heavier, more consuming. It was not a shadow I could escape, but a vast and merciless void that swallowed me whole. I fell through it without control, spiraling endlessly as though pulled by an unseen current, a relentless undertow that dragged me downward into depths beyond my comprehension. My mind spun with disorientation, fragments of thought colliding violently. Where was I going? What was happening to me? One truth emerged through the chaos. I was not returning to my body. That path had been severed. The realization settled coldly within me, but no answer came for the greater question. If not back, then where? I strained against the nothingness, searching for any sign of form or meaning. Yet everywhere I turned, I found only emptiness. No glimmer of light, no whisper of sound, no hint of warmth or life. An infinite, suffocating black pressed against me from every direction, enclosing me, consuming me. A terrible thought clawed its way through the haze of my mind. Was this all there was? Was this the truth I had spent my life defending? I had insisted death was final, that beyond the body lay only silence and oblivion. Had I been right all along, only to now exist as nothing more than a shred of consciousness adrift in a meaningless void? The possibility gnawed at me until despair threatened to tear me apart. I tried to cry out, to scream, to call for help, but my voice, if I still had one, was thin, fragile, and lost to the emptiness. Then something shifted. The force that had dragged me without mercy suddenly released me. The suffocating weight of the void still pressed upon me, but I no longer tumbled. I hung suspended, still and helpless, adrift in silence, so complete it felt like the end of sound itself. For a heartbeat, I believed I was alone. But then I felt it, a movement, faint, subtle, like a shadow stirring against the greater shadow of the void. My heart, if such a thing still beat within me, tightened. Something was there, watching, waiting. The chill that spread through me was not born of cold, but of realization. I was not alone. And in that moment, another truth cut through the fog of my thoughts. My life had been built upon reason, upon science, upon what could be tested and proven. I had mocked faith, laughed at the notion of God, dismissed the afterlife as a fable spun by frightened minds. But here, in the suffocating dark, facing something I could neither name nor understand, I knew with absolute certainty I had been wrong. Death was not the end. Something waited beyond, and what now fixed its unseen gaze upon me was only the beginning. The darkness dissolved, not into light, but into a vast, oppressive gray that stretched infinitely in every direction. A barren expanse without sky, without ground, without form, filled only by a heavy, lifeless fog. It was not silence, but it was not sound either. It was not warmth, nor was it cold. It was nothing, and yet it was everything. I was not alone within it. Shapes moved in the haze, drifting figures scattered like phantoms across this endless waste. They made no sound of torment, no cries of agony, but neither did they exude peace or purpose. Some wandered aimlessly, heads bowed, eyes hollow and unseeing. Others stood rooted as though frozen mid-thought, their gazes fixed upon nothing. I stepped forward, then again, my movements curiously weightless, effortless, each step sending out hollow echoes that rippled through the fog. As I drew closer to the figures, I studied their faces, and what I saw struck me with a hollow dread. These were not strangers. They were thinkers, scholars, intellectuals, men and women whose names I had spoken with reverence, whose works I had studied, whose discoveries had shaped the very world I lived in. These were the great minds I had modeled myself after, the ones I had aspired to emulate, and here they were, wandering, vacant, lost. Their expressions told the story words could not. Some bore regret etched into their eyes, others confusion, but many carried nothing at all. Blank. As though even the desire to question had long since faded from them. A sickening understanding took root within me. This was not heaven, nor was it hell. This was something else. A place for those who had searched endlessly for knowledge, yet never once sought truth. My chest tightened with panic as I tried to call out, to speak, but no sound came. They did not see me, did not acknowledge me, their aimless existence untouched by my presence. A tremor passed through the fog. I felt it deep within my core, though I could not name its source. It was not mere sound, nor was it energy. It was something older, greater, heavier. The air thickened, the fog curled into deliberate swirling shapes. The wandering figures melted into the background, fading into obscurity as a presence emerged from the haze. It was not a person, not an angel, not anything my mind could fit into a shape. It was vast, ungraspable, overwhelming. My entire being shuddered beneath its weight as it fixed itself upon me. It did not speak with words, yet its voice filled every corner of me, mind, soul, whatever fragments of existence remained. You have always searched for answers. The words were a weight, settling upon me like 1,000 stones pressing against my chest. I turned toward it, though there was nothing tangible to turn to. It was not form, yet it was form. Not light, yet it shone. Not human, not bound by age or gender, and yet it was intimate, immediate, within me. It saw me fully. Every thought, every belief, every shard of arrogance and fear. It knew me. It had always known me. And in that knowing, it showed me. Images surged into my mind with violent clarity, moments of my life replayed in relentless succession. I saw myself lecturing with confidence, dismantling faith in front of my students, reducing religion to mere human invention. I saw debates where I smirked with triumph, tearing down the beliefs of those who dared speak of God. Then the visions shifted. A student with trembling hands and tear-filled eyes in my office whispering, "But what if there is more?" I had dismissed her with arrogance. A colleague, sincere in his belief, offering his testimony, and I had mocked him. My grandmother's fragile voice murmuring a prayer over me as a child, and my own quiet laughter mocking her behind her back. Scene after scene, chance after chance, a lifetime of opportunities to wonder, to question, to seek something beyond myself. I had ignored them all, ridiculed them all. And now here, in a place where reason no longer mattered, I saw the truth that I had never allowed myself to consider. I had never searched. Not really. I had assumed I knew. And now, something greater than me had found me instead. My thoughts roared with defiance. I wanted to argue, to cry out that it was unfair, that I had been logical, rational, committed to knowledge. But what was reason here? What use was intellect in a place unbound by human logic? My fists tightened, my body, or whatever form I now occupied, trembled. Desperation consumed me, for the very thing I had spent my life dismantling was now the only thing I longed for. Faith. I turned back toward the figures drifting endlessly through the fog, the scholars, the thinkers, the great minds whose names once commanded respect on earth. They had built civilizations, reshaped worlds, but here they were, empty, directionless, forever wandering. And I understood with a dread so deep it hollowed me out that I now walked among them. I realized something far more terrifying than the silence that surrounded me. The truth settled over me with the weight of inevitability. I was one of them. My throat burned with the effort to form words, and though my voice came out ragged, strained, and barely more than a whisper, I managed to speak. What is this place? The question trembled into the vastness. The presence did not respond immediately. The silence stretched, pressing against me, until words finally surfaced, not spoken aloud, but seared into the core of my being, a place of the unresolved. I swallowed hard, though I no longer had flesh, no longer had a throat. Still, the instinct to fear remained. What does that mean? I asked, though my voice seemed smaller now, like an echo swallowed by endless fog. Another silence followed, and then the presence spoke again, its words vibrating through the marrow of my soul. You spent your life searching for knowledge, but knowledge is not wisdom, and wisdom is not truth. The fog surrounding me stirred, twisting, curling as though it were alive, responding to the weight of the words. It was not just a veil anymore, not just something I stood within. It was judging me. The presence lingered, unseen but undeniable, pressing against me until I felt stripped bare. I could not see it clearly, but I felt its gaze penetrating every part of me. It saw everything. Every fleeting thought I had ever entertained, every word I had ever spoken, every hidden motive I had buried. There was no refuge here, no clever defense or intellectual shield strong enough to protect me. And then it began. The air rippled, and suddenly my life unfolded before me. Not as memories observed from afar, but as realities lived once more. I was thrust back into them, forced to stand inside the moments I thought were long gone. I saw myself in a lecture hall, towering confidently before a class. My voice had been smooth, strong, sure of itself. Religion, I declared, my tone edged with dismissal, was created as a tool for the weak-minded. It offers comfort in place of logic, emotion in place of reason. The room had been still. Some students nodded in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably. I remembered the young woman in the front row, her hands clasped nervously in her lap. She hesitated, then raised her hand, her voice fragile yet earnest. But Professor, what if faith isn't about ignoring logic? What if it's something more? I had smiled then, amused by her sincerity, blind to her searching. Faith is belief without evidence. That's the definition, isn't it? Once you prove something, it ceases to be faith. Her face had fallen. Her confidence had shattered. The memory froze there, her expression lingering before me, eyes full of unasked questions of hope I had smothered. The presence's voice reverberated inside me. She was searching for truth, and you shut the door before she could step through. I tried to defend myself. I wanted to cry out that I had only been teaching critical thought, independence of mind. But before I could summon the words, the scene dissolved, shifting into another classroom, another debate. I stood behind a podium, my voice sharpened like a blade. A student dared to mention God, dared to raise the idea of faith in an academic setting. My words cut him down. You can believe whatever you want, but in a world of reason and evidence, faith is unnecessary. Science explains everything. The student's head dropped, shame written across his face. He never spoke of it again. You silenced him, the presence whispered, and the words pierced me deeper than any blade. My fists clenched. My form, whatever remained of it, shook with desperation. I was teaching them to think for themselves, I insisted, clinging to the only justification I had ever known. The presence gave no reply, no argument. Instead, more scenes unfolded, one after the other, relentless in their clarity. My younger self hunched in my office, devouring books that ridiculed belief, not out of curiosity, but out of hunger for affirmation. A conversation with a colleague, a man who still clung to his faith despite the weight of academia. I had mocked him, belittled him, laughed at him as though his conviction was weakness. Then my mother's bedside, her frail hand clutching mine, her voice faint, trembling. "There is more, my son." And my response, cold and final, "There is nothing, Mom, just rest." Her eyes had filled with sorrow, yet I ignored it, turned away from it, convinced of my certainty. The presence pressed against me again, words swelling inside my soul. You called yourself a seeker of truth, but you only sought to confirm what you already believed. My mind reeled, fighting, searching for defense. I only followed reason, I shouted, though my voice quaked. I never saw proof of God. How could I believe? The reply came without hesitation. You never wanted proof. The words struck me like thunder, leaving me hollow. You ignored it when it was before you. You dismissed it when it was given. You mocked those who found it before you. My breath, or whatever remained of it, came ragged and frantic. That's not true, I whispered, though even I heard the hollowness of my denial. Deep down, I knew. It was true. I had never sought truth. I had sought victory. I had built my identity on dismantling others, but I had never dared to ask the only question that mattered. What if I am wrong? The weight of it crushed me. All my lectures, all my debates, all my carefully reasoned arguments, they dissolved into nothing. I had torn faith from others, and now I had none to hold on to. The air shifted. The fog parted. And then I saw him. The presence that had been hidden stepped forward, no longer veiled, no longer distant. A figure radiant with light, not blinding but overwhelming, not oppressive but undeniable. My knees buckled beneath me. I fell, not in defeat but in awe, because I knew who stood before me before I even saw his face. It was Jesus Christ. His eyes met mine, and in an instant, everything within me was undone. I felt truth, not anger, not condemnation, but a truth so vast and so infinite it broke every defense I had ever built. I had no arguments left, no words to twist, no intellect to hide behind. For the first time in my existence, I understood. Knowledge had never been the goal. Truth had always been the goal. And now, standing in his presence, I was face to face with it. The moment I saw him, everything changed. The fog, the shadows, the crushing weight of my failures, the echoes of every denial and every proud argument I had ever made, all of it dissolved, consumed by a radiance that was not of this world. This light was not simply bright, nor merely warm. It was absolute. It was the very definition of reality itself, reshaping everything I thought I knew. It did not blind, it did not scorch, but it filled every corner, every empty space, every hidden place where doubt once lived. There was no deception within it. No room left for questions or escape. I had lived my life demanding evidence, mocking faith, scorning the unseen. But now I stood face to face with the very answer I had never wanted to find. Jesus. I did not question, I did not hesitate, I simply knew. Recognition surged through me deeper than memory, deeper than reason. It was as if every fiber of my being had always known him, waiting for this moment. The one I had dismissed as a story for the gullible, a myth for the weak, a crutch for the uneducated. He was real. More real than any truth I had ever built my career defending. My body gave way before I could think. I fell to my knees, not out of decision, but instinct. Standing before him was like standing at the very center of existence. His presence consumed me, not as a crushing weight, but as an undeniable force. It was like fire that did not burn, like a storm that did not terrify, like a king who saw me not merely as a subject, but as something he loved. And yet shame ripped through me. How could I not be ashamed? My life had been one long crusade against him. I had mocked his followers. I had stood in classrooms convincing eager minds that belief was weakness, that faith was superstition, that God was nothing more than a fading relic. And now I was face to face with the truth I had rejected. Tears burned within me, if tears even existed in this place. I could not look at him. I could not speak. My soul longed to form words, to explain, to justify, but what defense could I possibly make? What excuse could stand before truth itself? Then he spoke. You sought truth, but you never sought me. His voice did not thunder. It did not echo across the heavens. It did not need to. It entered me directly, bypassing ears and thought, piercing straight into my soul. The weight of those words fell on me heavier than any argument, more cutting than any debate I had ever won, more devastating than any philosophy I had ever studied. He was right. My entire life I had claimed to chase truth, to pursue knowledge, to be a man of reason. But in all my seeking, I had never once sought him. I had sought to disprove, to dismantle, to destroy. I had never sought to understand. I forced my head upward, trembling, my voice breaking into the silence. I didn't know. His face remained unchanged. His expression was not anger, not fury. It was sorrow, yet sorrow wrapped in love. Not the conditional love I had believed in all my life, love that is given and taken, earned and lost. This love was different. It was steady, unwavering, eternal. A love that had always been there, even when I mocked him, even when I worked against him. But love alone was not enough. His gaze carried eternity, and with it came the weight of judgment. You never wanted to know. The words shook me. I opened my mouth to argue, to protest that I had only needed proof, only needed evidence strong enough to silence my doubt. But even as the thought formed, I knew it was a lie. I had not wanted proof. I had wanted victory. I had wanted to stand above faith, above religion, above the countless men and women who I had secretly pitied as simple-minded. I had made a god of my own intellect, worshipped the altar of my own pride. Now, face to face with him, that arrogance was unbearable. My body shook, my arms wrapped around myself, as though I could keep my soul from unraveling in his presence. I was blind, I whispered. He did not speak at first. The silence was heavy, but not with wrath. It was sorrow, infinite sorrow. Then softly, with a voice that seemed to hold the weight of creation itself, he said, "You are not the only one." His hand lifted, and in an instant the world around us shifted. What I saw froze me in terror. They were there, countless figures, an ocean of souls, professors, scholars, scientists, intellectuals, philosophers, men and women who had devoted their lives to the pursuit of knowledge. I recognized some of them, colleagues, mentors, men I had admired, thinkers whose works I had studied, whose names filled the pages of history, and yet all of them were here. Not in torment, not in flames, but outside of heaven. They had chased truth but rejected its source. They had prized logic, intellect, reason, but despised wisdom. And wisdom, I now knew, begins with God. My chest tightened. I shook, unable to contain the horror of what I was seeing. These were the minds that shaped history, that built nations, that wrote books and theories that defined human thought. And yet, here they wandered, empty, cut off, just like me. I turned to him, my voice fractured and small. What happens to them? His gaze did not falter. His words cut with unshakable certainty. They made their choice. The truth struck me harder than death. Heaven was not for those who denied hell. It was for those who chose God, and so many, too many, had chosen themselves instead. My hands trembled, my throat closed. Is there still hope for me? His expression did not change, yet something shifted between us, as if the very air had taken on weight. Then he asked me the question that broke me. Now that you know the truth, what will you do with it? The finality in his tone was undeniable. This was not theory, not debate, not a lecture or experiment. This was eternity, and my answer would define it. The world stretched before me, endless, familiar, yet stripped of illusion. I was not merely seeing landscapes or people, I was seeing the forces behind it all, the unseen hands that shaped reality. For the first time, I saw the truth behind everything I had once defended. Knowledge had not been neutral. It had been twisted, weaponized, used to replace faith. Jesus raised his hand again, and layers of deception peeled away like curtains drawn back from a stage. What had been hidden was now plain. I saw universities, schools, halls of learning I had revered as holy ground. I had lived my life within those walls, teaching, debating, arguing, and now I saw the truth. Faith had not been ignored there. It had been erased. Not by violence, not by law, not by overt oppression. It had been removed with subtlety, carefully, deliberately, like poison slipped into a well. And I realized I had been part of it. Faith had not been erased with violence, nor outlawed with decrees, but reshaped slowly, deliberately, until it no longer appeared as an enemy, but as something obsolete, irrelevant, an artifact of a forgotten age. In classrooms, students filled their notebooks with ideas of philosophy, history, and ethics. The discussion seemed open, intelligent, exploratory. Yet the instant the name of God was spoken, everything shifted. The atmosphere thickened, an unease spread, and a subtle but sharp skepticism revealed itself. Professors, men and women like myself, carried authority in their tone, dismissing the divine as myth, as nothing more than cultural narrative, a relic of pre-scientific imagination. It was precise. It was deliberate. I had stood in lecture halls watching young faces soak up every word, not learning how to question, but how to dismiss. The divine was reduced to fairy tales, to crude superstition, to comforting illusions for fragile minds, and only now did I see it for what it was. They weren't being told to reject God with rebellion. They were being conditioned to believe they had no need for him at all. A chill slid through me. How could I have been blind to it? Jesus said nothing. He let me see. The vision shifted, layering itself across society, showing me how the same hand had worked its way into every sphere. Media, entertainment, newsrooms, screens glowing in every home, all moving together like a single organism. Truth wasn't denied, truth was replaced. Faith was mocked, shown as backward and embarrassing. Those who still clung to it were paraded as uneducated, desperate, clinging to a dead thing. At the same time, new gods were exalted. Science ceased to be exploration, it was enthroned. Knowledge itself became an altar. Each new discovery was not merely an answer, but another stone laid in the foundation of a world convinced it no longer required a creator. Then I saw them. The shadows. Dark figures moving just beyond perception, unseen yet deeply present, whispering in the ears of leaders, professors, entertainers. They did not need to control. They only nudged, planting ideas, desires, subtle convictions in just the right places. Politicians spoke with certainty, celebrities shaped culture with ease, academics lectured with passion. They believed their words, they thought they stood on truth. They were not liars, they were believers who had already been led into the great deception. They imagined they were shaping a better world, blind to the hands that moved them. My chest constricted, my fists clenched. If I still had a body, it trembled. This is orchestrated. And Jesus, without moving his lips, confirmed it. Yes, I had told myself that humanity had outgrown God, that we had matured, that faith was an ancient skin shed in the light of reason. But I was wrong. It wasn't evolution. It was deception. A patient, centuries-long deception, unfolding too slowly for anyone to notice, and God help me, I had been part of it. I had stood in those halls, I had spoken with confidence, shaping minds, pushing them to doubt their faith while thinking I was liberating them. In truth, I was nothing but another link in the chain of lies. My knees buckled beneath the weight of realization. This is bigger than I ever imagined. It always was, Jesus said. Why? My voice cracked in the silence. Why invest so much effort to erase faith? His gaze deepened, heavy with grief. Because what comes next depends on it. Cold dread spread through me, and the vision opened again. I saw generations stretching forward and backward, my own life among them. I saw classrooms stripped of God long before I ever entered them. I saw myself molded, shaped by the same system I had trusted, thinking my conclusions were my own, when in truth they had been written into me before I could question. The future came into view. Cities gleamed with light. Technology ruled every corner of existence. Artificial intelligence replaced human effort. Medicine conquered disease. Wars disappeared, replaced by a new, polished unity. Humanity called it enlightenment. But beneath the sheen, I felt the rot. Faith was not destroyed by persecution, it was erased by irrelevance. Churches became museums, centers for community or worse, sanctuaries for something not divine. Scripture was filed under outdated philosophy. From childhood, children were told not just to ignore God, but to despise the very thought of him. And the people, they were empty, hollow. Their lives overflowed with distractions, with endless pleasures and manufactured realities. But none of it touched the deep hunger they no longer dared to name. Those who still believed were scattered, voices lost in the storm, mocked, dismissed, tolerated as quaint delusions. They were not imprisoned, they were not killed, they were silenced with indifference. They don't even care, I whispered. Jesus' eyes did not move. That is the final deception. Then I saw it, worse than all that came before. Humanity crowned itself its own God. Science was worshipped not for discovery, but for dominion. Leaders rose not as tyrants, but as saviors, adored because they gave the world what it craved, a life without God. Humanity declared itself free, redeemed, complete. And then came something more. The arrival of new voices, new powers dressed as guides, as allies, as creators. Humanity welcomed them with open arms. They weren't afraid. They had been prepared. My heart seized with terror. This had been planned. Every step, every layer of deception had been crafted for this final unveiling. The forces in the shadows had been waiting for centuries, and now it was almost here. I turned to Jesus, desperate. What do I do? The vision shattered, the future dissolved. I stood before him once again in the place where it began. His eyes pierced through me with love and sorrow bound together. His voice was steady, unyielding. Now that you know the truth, what will you do with it? I collapsed. My life had been spent chasing answers, confident in my knowledge, certain of my conclusions. Now I knew nothing. But one thing was clear. I could never return to blindness. I could never pretend I had not seen. My voice broke as I fell to my knees. I will tell them, I will warn them. Whatever it takes. Jesus held my gaze, and his words cut through me. Your time is not yet over. Light cracked, reality splintered. A violent force pulled me back, sudden and unstoppable. I screamed against it, not from rebellion, but from longing. No, please, not yet. I wasn't ready to leave. But Jesus' expression, filled with love and sorrow, did not waver. His final command thundered through me. Go back and tell them. The pull intensified. I reached out desperately, aching to cling to his presence, but the brilliance fractured, and I was hurled back into the world I had left. For the first time in the entire span of my existence, I had touched absolute truth, something unshakable, eternal, and alive. And I did not want to let it go. I clung to it with everything inside me, desperate to hold on to that reality. But the choice had already been made for me, long before I realized it. I was being sent back. The world around me fractured, dissolved, blurred into shapes and lights that no human mind could ever properly describe. It twisted, bent, stretched into something that no logic could hold together. The very fabric of existence seemed to unravel before my eyes. And then I saw it. The sorrow in the eyes of Jesus, sorrow deeper than oceans, sorrow that carried eternity within it. His face faded, retreating into distance I could not cross. Then came the blackness. Then came the pain. A crushing weight pressed down on my chest, relentless and suffocating, like the hand of death refusing to let me go. My lungs screamed for air, burning as though I'd been drowning for hours. My body convulsed, every muscle locking into paralyzing shock. And then, at last, a sound tore from me, a gasp, violent and ragged, an inhale that ripped the silence apart. It felt as though someone had pulled me from the floor of the ocean, dragged me back into light. Blinding fluorescent light seared my eyes. Voices drifted in and out, frantic and broken, as if they belonged to another world. A beeping sound cut through the noise, sharp and urgent. Hands grabbed me, pinning me down, forcing me to stay. Professor, Professor, can you hear me? The words struck my mind like a hammer, jolting me into reality. Pressure radiated through my ribs, every breath igniting a deep ache. My chest rose and fell, struggling, fighting for air. Slowly, the world returned, crashing down on me with unbearable clarity. The sterile white walls of a hospital room, the sharp sting of antiseptic, the hollow scent of plastic and steel, the mechanical rhythm of machines marking every fragile heartbeat. A doctor towered over me, his face frozen in disbelief. A nurse pressed a stethoscope to my chest, her mouth hanging open as though she could not believe what her senses were telling her. I tried to speak, but my throat was scorched raw, my vocal cords unwilling to obey. This body, this vessel I had been returned to, felt alien. I wore it like an ill-fitting suit, strange and unfamiliar. The doctor turned, muttering under his breath to those gathered. He's gone. His heart stopped. We called it. His voice was heavy with finality. The nurse nodded, her voice breaking. 17 minutes. He was dead for 17 minutes. 17 minutes in this world. Yet in the place I had just been, it had stretched into an eternity. Before I could process what those words meant, the door burst open. Faces spilled in. My family, my colleagues, people who knew me, people who never expected to see me breathe again. My sister staggered forward, her trembling hands covering her mouth, tears flooding down her cheeks. One of my colleagues, a man who had once argued with me endlessly in lecture halls, stood pale and rigid, staring at me as though he had seen a ghost. I blinked, fighting to anchor myself in this reality. But nothing about it felt real anymore. Not after what I had witnessed. This world had lost the weight it once carried. It seemed like a shadow compared to where I had been. The doctors and nurses whispered to one another, their language medical, logical, desperate for answers. But their explanations, their theories, their data meant nothing. They would never understand. They could never explain. Because I knew the truth. I had been sent back. And I was no longer the same man who had left. I lay there in silence, staring at the ceiling, the heaviness of my return pressing down on me like a mountain. For my whole life, I had believed death was final, the end of all things, the closing of the book. I had believed consciousness was no more than the firing of neurons, a trick of biology. Faith to me had been an invention of fragile minds seeking comfort in the face of oblivion. I had stood on stages in lecture halls declaring the non-existence of God. I had mocked belief, prided myself on reason, on logic, on the pursuit of knowledge. But I had stood before Jesus. I had looked into his eyes. I had seen the deception that shackled the world. I had glimpsed what lay ahead, the path humanity was blindly walking. And now I sat among people who had no idea what I had seen. The weight of that knowledge threatened to crush me. But his command burned in my mind, unshakable. Go back and tell them. I had rejected him my entire life. Now my very breath, my very existence was testimony that I could never deny him again. The nurse touched my arm gently, her voice trembling but soft. Professor, do you know where you are? I turned my head slowly. My throat was torn and dry, my body weak, but my voice came out steady, solid. Yes. I paused, gathering air that felt heavier than before. And I have something to tell you. The room buzzed with murmurs, with disbelief. 17 minutes. 17 minutes without life. By all logic, I should not be alive. By all medical reasoning, I should not be conscious, should not be speaking. And yet I lived, because I had been sent back with a purpose. I lifted my eyes and found my sister's gaze. She had been silently weeping since the moment she saw me breathing. A believer, always. I had dismissed her faith as foolishness, mocked her trust in God. She had never wavered, not once. And now I was the one who had been broken and remade. I need to talk to you, I said, my voice raspy but firm. She leaned closer, whispering, about what? I hesitated, not because I doubted, but because I knew how impossible it would sound. I had spent my entire life tearing apart the foundations of faith, demanding proof, dismissing the unseen. And now I was about to speak of the ultimate proof, the thing I had witnessed my own soul. I turned my gaze toward my colleagues, two professors who had come to see for themselves if I was truly alive. Dr. Mason stood among them, a man I had once debated beside, just as skeptical as I had always been. His eyes carried the same cold analysis mine once had when listening to believers. I knew exactly how he would respond. He would laugh, he would dismiss, he would scorn, because I had done the same. I swallowed, my throat dry as dust, and said the words that weighed more than anything I had ever spoken. I saw him. Dr. Mason blinked, confused. Saw who? My fists clenched. I braced myself. Jesus. The room fell into silence. My sister gasped. Dr. Mason let out a short, mocking laugh. You just had a near-death hallucination, Professor. Your brain. Don't, I interrupted, raising a trembling hand. Don't try to explain it away. The laugh died in his throat. His expression shifted, caught between disbelief and something else. I saw it in his eyes, the same war I had once fought within myself. He wanted a rational answer. He wanted to dismiss me. But he couldn't. I leaned forward, my voice firm despite the weakness in my body. I was in another place. I saw the deception consuming the world. We think we're searching for truth, but we've been led away from it. We've been used. Dr. Mason narrowed his eyes. Used? By who? By the forces that have spent centuries pulling humanity away from God, I said, exhaling slowly. Not by violence, not by fear, but by distraction. By convincing us that faith is outdated, unnecessary, primitive. By making us indifferent. He didn't speak. He only stared. He wasn't convinced. Not yet, but he was listening. And that was enough. My sister's hand tightened on mine. Her voice shook with emotion. Jesus sent you back to tell them. Yes, my throat constricted. To tell them. I looked around that room, at the doctors, the nurses, my family, my colleagues. I knew most would never believe me. Many would mock me, dismiss me, just as I had mocked others. But some would listen. That was why I'd been sent back, because it was not too late. And then, like lightning, it struck me. A flash in my mind. The final image. The last thing Jesus had shown me before I woke. My pulse thundered, my breath caught. I had forgotten in the overwhelming flood of returning to life. But now it surged back, and it was terrifying. My sister noticed my expression, her eyes wide. What is it? I swallowed hard, my mouth dry as stone. Before I woke, he showed me one final thing. The words trembled in my throat, because if they thought what I had already said was shocking, they were not prepared for what was coming next.